In this Elden Ring Nightreign video, I'm going to be showing you an Ironeye run through. I'm going to be giving you guys a few more tips on them before we get into that. Things like relics, which ones I really like, plus a little bit about the regular bow you begin with. And in this run, I'm going to try and give you guys some advice on why I select certain things when I'm presented with them, in the attempt to help you guys make better decisions about what passives you should be picking up or what weapons you should be selecting when you are playing as Ironeye. So the first thing I want to talk about with Ironeye is his starting bow, and unlike a lot of other characters in this game, the starting bow in Ironeye can actually be used for a whole run if you outfit it appropriately. If you set it up with relics for the element of the boss you'll be facing that has a weakness to that, then you can guarantee you have that element, which can be really, really strong. Or if you want to set like bleed on it or poison on it, it can be really strong as well. So there is definitely a case to be made for using your starter bow when you're playing Ironeye if you set it up effectively. Now, obviously, if you do this, you'll need to upgrade it throughout your run, so you definitely want to make sure you get stones to do this as you're moving through the map, if possible. Another thing I want to mention is that arrows deal thrusting damage usually. You can get the bow, the Erdtree bow, that gives you all holy damage, but otherwise, all the other bows are going to do predominantly physical damage, that's thrusting damage, or they're going to have like thrusting damage plus like magic or fire or holy added onto them. And when you attack an enemy or a boss that's in the forward portion of its attack animation, not the wind-up part, but the actual forward part of its attack animation, you do counter damage if you are attacking with thrusting damage. This will increase the damage that you deal substantially, and this happens easily throughout fights. Like when you're attacking a boss that's fighting another player, they're attacking, and while your arrows are flying in, sometimes they're dealing counter damage inadvertently just from you attacking. So when you look at things that increase thrusting counter damage, you definitely want to take them on Ironeye when possible because you'll do this damage regularly. This is like the Spear Talisman or like a passive buff that increases your counter thrust damage, or even a relic that has that. That's definitely something to look out for. Now, talking about weapons and priorities, like what I look for, the first thing, again, as always, is does it have Scarlet Rot, yes or no? A lot of times, if it has Scarlet Rot, I will just take it anyway, even if it's a melee weapon. Sometimes during fights, I'll just try and apply Scarlet Rot quickly in melee range and then get away and start ranging down. Or you can drop it for a melee character in your group so they have it. But definitely Scarlet Rot makes boss fights a lot easier, especially the end of day ones and the end of, the whole run ones. The next thing I ask myself when looking at the weapons dropping is, does the element match the final boss we're facing? If you didn't set up your bow to match the boss, maybe you just set it on like all 8 bosses or something and you just have your default setup, you're definitely going to want to be looking for the element of the boss that you're facing. If it adds like fire damage or adds holy damage or adds lightning, etc. If it has one of those, you definitely want to pick it up. The next thing you want to take a look is, does this bow deal more damage than the one you currently have? And does it have an added damage type or a status effect on it? If it does, then you definitely want to pick it up. After this, you're taking a look at the passive effect and whether that increases ranged damage, for instance. Ranged damage is one you want to look out for a lot, or increased damage at max HP. This is really good because you tend to stay at range, and ideally, in an ideal world, you wouldn't be getting hit on Ironeye and you'd be dealing more damage when you're at max HP. Or arrow drop-off reduction, and this is good because this has been added in the recent patch. It reduces the amount that your arrow damage goes down the further away from your target. If you didn't know, when you're attacking with bow, you have to be within a certain range to get full damage, and the further away you get, the less and less damage it deals. This helps remove that, so you're dealing more and more damage at range, depending on how far back you are, and that's another one you want to look at for passive effects. And then lastly, I look at the weapon skill. Weapon skills are not something you use all the time when you're playing Ironeye. Rain of Arrows is really good for larger bosses. Barrage can be good for picking up players and applying status effects. But most of the time when you're playing Ironeye, you're either going to be using your default attack, your standard attack, to just shell out arrows into the target, or you're going to be using like your charge attack on a big target that you're close to. Now, when it comes to relics, there are several that I like, and I generally can't get all of these on all of them. But the first thing is I like Ironeye Mark Duration. I feel like this is almost an absolute must on any Ironeye, and that's because there are a lot of bosses where you just cannot deal enough damage as a group sometimes to pop that mark before it expires if you don't have this. And if you have the Ironeye Mark Duration, you can generally do this even on the harder bosses to trigger the mark. So definitely get this if you can. The next one I absolutely love is plus skill charges for your mark so that you can use it up to 2 times. Now, it might sound redundant because you have your mark on the target. You're not going to cast it again. Well, it's already on there. You're trying to pop it. But there are a lot of times where you can use it evasionally, or you kill a target quickly with the mark, and then you can go mark another target quickly, and then you can down that target quickly. So it's really, really good. And once you have it, you'll absolutely want it. And when you're like moving through the air too, you can like double use this and move further in the air and close distances on places more quickly while you're falling too. So it's just really good overall. I really like that one. In terms of proving bow damage, standard attack and plus bow damage are the ones you want to look out for. I think standard attack gives you about a 10% increase on your R1 attacks or your light attacks. This is your regular bow attacks. And bow damage, I think, gives you about a 6% increase. And obviously, this is to all the attacks you do as a bow. So both of these are really good. Ideally, you would have both of these if you can get them both on the right combination of relics. Ultimate art when defeating enemies is still really strong. I have recommended this on my previous 2 runs as well. It's a really good one. This allows you to use your ultimate on Ironeye, wipe out a bunch of enemies, and then refill it quickly and wipe out enemies again. Like you can usually as Ironeye, when you get higher levels, you can just one-shot a lot of trash enemies and you can charge up your ultimate really quickly, which can save you a lot of time when getting into camps or facing bosses and things like that. The next thing I look out for usually is any element when you're facing certain bosses. Like you can put it on and guarantee yourself that if you know you're going against a certain boss, like the Dark Drift Knight, for instance, having lightning to interrupt his attacks is really strong. In that case, you might want to do it. But if you're just putting like, I don't know, random 4 bosses or random 8 bosses or something, I like poison by default. This usually comes with increased damage when poisoning an enemy or fighting poisoned enemies as well. So this can buff your damage. But it also gives you a reason to keep your starting bow like a lot longer in your run, because you can just set poison with that bow really quickly on a boss and then switch to a higher damage bow. Or you can do what I do, put your poison like in one hand and your other bow in the other, and then just L1 till you get poison and then R run with the other bow, or R1 till you get poison and then L1 with the other bow. And the last thing I want to mention is not a relic I would recommend, but it's just for your useful information. The post-damage attack relic that usually lets you heal after you take damage if you attack quickly doesn't work with bows, so you absolutely don't want to use this when you're playing Ironeye. Okay, so onto the run itself. It's Vex and I again. She's on Recluse, I'm on Ironeye this time, and we actually have a Duchess Gold Lord, and Duchess in this run actually plays amazingly well. Believe it or not, this person told me after the run that this was their first Duchess run, which I find hard to believe, but they absolutely slap in this run. So we have a pretty smooth run. So we're doing the Gaping Jaw Expedition. I start with a Poison Bow, which is really nice. I start with this typically anyway, but it's really good for this boss. And we clear the first group of guys there and level up to level 2 before quickly heading to the nearby fort, hoping to get Vex or the Duchess some spells. So once we get up to the top of the fort, the first thing I do is face off against the knight up there. I mark him in immediately, because if you can get a few hits into this guy, you usually stance break him. It makes this fight go a lot easier because he has a shield, and if he's blocking all your arrows, then you can take a long time to defeat this guy. So once we get the boss down, I pick up the Stone Sword key from the chest so we can do an Everjail, and I grab the Horn Bow because it has a bit more damage than what I have currently, and it makes me less likely to be targeted, although in this group, I'm not sure that's a great thing. I then set the bow in my left hand so I can do more damage with L1 and set poison with R1, and then I level up to level 3 quickly. So then we make our way for a nearby fire camp, and we run by a couple of merchants. If I had any runes at all, it would have been a good time to stop to check their inventory, maybe buy a smithing stone and upgrade my poison bow, but I don't have any because it's so early in the game. So as we get into the camp, it's a little bit foggy and it was hard for me to see, so I couldn't find the jump to go up in the tower, and so I basically waste a little bit of time. Our Duchess finds it correctly, decides to go up there, and I head off to the other Red Main Knight to help Vex so we can kill it quickly. Once our Red Main Knight is down, I kill a couple of enemies and I head over to the tower. It looks like we're going to have to climb up in order to get our reward. However, on the way, Vex pings a bow for me, so I have to run back and pick it up. And this bow has frost buildup on attack, so I'm going to have frost buildup in one hand and poison in the other, which will allow me to alternate between these two status effects. And then I quickly try and level up at the Site of Grace, but I'm like 40 runes short, so then I just make my way up to the tower. Now, what's interesting throughout this run is that the Duchess is also applying the same two status effects, so a lot of times we apply these very quickly, and then we're not really doing a lot afterward. But in the case of like the composite bow, I'm still dealing lots of damage while I'm firing into it, And if you weren't playing a Duchess, this build would probably be a lot more effective than if you have one that's doing the exact same 2 status effects. So looking at the rewards for beating the Red Main Knight, nothing is particularly good. More runes from defeated enemies is not bad, especially if you can get it early on in a run, since it will apply to the whole run, so I go ahead and take that. We then make our way to a nearby Everjail, taking out the Scarab on the way, getting a Taker's cameo, which is not bad to have for regaining health on defeating enemies. There is a Tree Sentinel nearby, but we're too low level to take this on right now. We'd probably beat it, but it would take a lot of time, and the Nightreign has already started to close in. So we open the Everjail. It's a couple of Nox Warriors. I quickly mark one of them. I was trying to hit both of them simultaneously, which is nice. I then ult to deal damage to both, and I start attacking one of them, trying to set Frostbite on it before I start switching to Poison to then put Poison on it. Once I set Poison on it, I switch back to the Frostbite bow simply because it does more damage per shot, even though I know I'm not going to trigger Frostbite again. Looking at the rewards here, the increase to stamina is a no-brainer. This will allow me to shoot more before having to let my stamina recover, and it's always really good on Ironeye. I then quickly level up at the Site of Grace a couple of times before heading to the nearby church in order to get our first flask. So once we get to church, we head over to the near Frost Runes, hoping to clear it out before the Nightreign gets there. Once we get to the Albinarch Archers at the top of the runes, I quickly mark both with the marking ability and then start attacking and knock one off the wolf, and I keep putting damage into them. Unfortunately, one gets in a weird spot. When I go to mark it, I slide right over the cliff's edge, so it takes us a little bit longer to kill this enemy than it should have. So this results in us being inside the Nightreign barely when we get the boss down. Looking at the rewards, there really aren't any that benefit me except HP restoration from Flask, which is, better than nothing, but that's what I go ahead and take because nothing else is really going to benefit me much. So after healing up at a nearby Site of Grace, we decide to head to a mine that's close by. Part of it is going to be in the Nightreign, so we will take some damage from the Nightreign while we're in there, but the bosses are usually very easy. We're counting on bursting it down quickly, getting our Smithing Stone, and getting the hell out of there and healing up at the Site of Grace on the way out. So once we get to the troll boss inside the mine, I mark it very quickly and then use my ult to help facilitate stance breaking and help burst this thing down. So once we get outside the mine, we heal up really quick and level up, and then we take down a Scarab to get another talisman. This is a Roar Medallion, which is not good for any of us, really. So we just leave it there, and then there's a Black Knife Assassin that we decide to take on since it's not too bad of a boss. I mark it as soon as I can because this boss can be really annoying, but if you can pop that mark, you can usually stance break it, and then you can usually get a critical strike, but our Duchess gets behind it, critical strikes it anyway, and then does it again. The rewards for me, unfortunately, here are all terrible. A shield, a sword, or resistances. We're fighting a boss that doesn't really do status effects, so none of these are particularly great. And we don't even really have anyone in the group that can make good use of these, really, so it's even worse in that case. Then we head to a nearby great church. We take on the Guardian Golem there. The first thing I do again is mark it before attacking into it, and we burst it down very quickly. Again, the rewards for me are almost useless. A shield is not good really for me in this case because I'm dual wielding bows, and the other bow really doesn't do anything for me either. So after this, we make our way to the church in the bottom left to try and get it before the Nightreign gets there, which we barely do, and then we head up to the Frenzy Camp in order to defeat that and wipe that out as quickly as possible, trying to get some more XP and also maybe another buff. So once I get to the Frenzied Flame Troll, I mark it quickly, then use my ultimate to get some damage into that mark and also get some stance damage on the boss before I start attacking it. I start with Frost Arrows, but once I see the Chilling Mist put Frostbite on the troll, I switch to Poison Arrows, and we quickly set Poison as well. The troll goes down, and it's very, very fast. So after defeating the troll, I have some options. I can get continuous HP recovery, which isn't terrible. I can get extra damage while two-handing, but I'm dual wielding. I'm not even sure two-handing applies to bows either, so I'm a little hesitant to take that, even though I'm not really using it anyway. So I take more runes increased. It's not too far into the run. We're still on day 1, even though it's near the end of day 1, which means this will apply to all of day 2, which could come in handy if there are some like Crucible Knights or something in the main keep. This could add a lot more runes to my intake when doing that. Next, we head to a nearby Everjail, and there is a Bloodhound Knight there, so we quickly set Frostbite on it, and then I start firing charge shots with poison from close range, trying to hit him with all 3 arrows at the same time. We get poison on him. Doesn't really matter. He goes down very quickly after that. And for my ward, I choose increased max stamina. Again, more stamina for dodge rolling, attacking, dodging, running, etc. It's all good. We then make our way to where the boss is going to spawn. I kill all the crabs on the way because I'm one-shotting them with my bow, just charging up my ultimate. And I do find a Godskin Stitcher on the ground, a lightning one, that does have an increase to charged attack. This is the R2 attack on your bow, and I pick that up just because I do use it sometimes. It's not as good as just having, you know, increased or range damage or extra damage when you're at full HP, but it's not bad to have, and I don't have my full inventory anyway, so I might as well pick it up. And as we fight the end of day 1 trash, you can see how much I'm marking here. I mark every opportunity that I can. The extra charge from my mark is coming in handy. It's not only dealing a little bit of damage, but it's allowing just a couple of attacks to burst them so they go down faster. And you should really get in the habit of marking every time something's not marked, if you can. Honestly, I think the biggest difference between a new Ironeye and a seasoned Ironeye is that a new Ironeye will mark only very rarely, or like when they feel like they're safe, whereas a seasoned Ironeye will get in there and try and mark every possible chance that their mark is not on a boss. So once the Valiant Gargoyle spawns, the first thing I do is mark it, and then I quickly ultimate to get some stance damage and damage into that mark. Hopefully we'll get that mark to pop and we can stance break this guy, and that gives me a chance to maybe use this ultimate again in this fight, because usually Valiant Gargoyles take a while to defeat because they aren't susceptible to a lot of status effects, and they're not really weak to a lot of damage types. So unfortunately, we just missed getting the mark to pop, probably because I had to sit there and heal because I got hit, so some of that's on me, but as soon as my mark wears off, I apply it again to the boss. Unfortunately, Fex goes down shortly after that. We're able to pick her up really quickly, though. I hit her a couple times, the Duchess hits her a couple times, and the Valiant Gargoyle switches to the Twin Blade. So I see my second mark wears off. We didn't quite pop it. I moved toward to try and engage it and mark it again, but it's hanging along the rim of the Nightreign, and I don't want to accidentally slide into the Nightreign and be outside. So I'm sort of waiting for it to move into a position that I can mark it effectively. Eventually I do get a chance to mark it again, but we still aren't able to get enough damage into it to get those marks to pop, and this is absolutely one of the reasons that, again, you need the extended duration on marks. Because imagine trying to do this if your duration wasn't nearly as long as what it is. You would never be able to do it on this boss. And sometimes with the right combination or a little luck, you can pop these more reliably, increasing the speed of these types of fights. So my options at the end of this fight are Blood Loss in the vicinity increases attack power. I don't think anyone is using Blood Loss at the moment, so I don't pick that one. Poison and Rot triggers continuous HP recovery. I've been putting Poison regularly, so I decided to go with this one. But realistically, probably the HP restoration on successive attacks would probably be better. It would probably be more reliable throughout the course of a run, just from killing random enemies, getting health and stuff like that. But either one of these two is probably alright. So as day 2 starts, we make our way to a nearby fort. We're still trying to get Fex some good spells. She doesn't have any yet. And this is a place that has magic staffs for sure, so we head there first. So once we get to the top, I ult the Crystallion almost immediately. And this is because the 3 of us don't really have a lot of weapons that are good at breaking the stance of these Crystallions. We have a mage, me with ranged attacks, and probably a dagger on the Duchess. So I just figure, let me ult this guy, that way we can stance break him really quickly and we don't have to fuss around with this for quite some time. So for my rewards, there is a short bow with a bit more damage and magic weapon damage attached to it, which none of the bosses are weak to magic, but this still would probably be a good upgrade in damage if I wasn't going for status effects. Or my options are the Magic Meteoric Ore Blade, I decided to pick up the Ore Blade and give it to the Duchess because it's a bleed weapon and it's got magic attack power, which should scale somewhat with intelligence. It's not the best weapon for Duchess, but I don't really need the short bow either, so there just weren't a lot of good choices here. So once we complete the fort there, we head to the nearby center area in hopes of finding some enemies to give some XP. We noticed that there is a Crucible Knight at the entrance before we drop down. We decided to take him on here because when you see Crucible Knights at the center area, you should kill them all. They give tons and tons of XP. This makes it possible to get to 15 reliably. And Fex is trailing a little bit behind anyway, so we really don't want to go down and engage the center boss without her if possible. So we start fighting the Crucible Knight, who is susceptible to poison, so we make sure to get that applied. Then we also trigger Frostbite, and he goes down pretty quick. So once we drop down to the sewer area, I pick up the rune buff quickly, then I shoot one crab to fully charge my ultimate. We run in, we see it's a Royal Revenant, so I mark it as quickly as possible and then use my ultimate following that in order to get some damage and stance damage into it. Unfortunately though, I back away with a little bit of health and I'm crouching down to do some charge attacks because he's a big enemy trying to get 3 arrows into him. And he does a poison breath attack that he spits onto me right when I'm doing this, and I get stuck in the animation and die. I was not expecting him to breathe poison this quickly into the fight. Luckily though, Duchess picks me up not too long after that. I put a few charged attacks into him, I mark him real quick, and then we burst him down. So for my reward, I selected improved thrust and counterattack, and as I mentioned, this is when you do damage, thrusting damage to an enemy that is in the forward attack animation. This will happen periodically as you're fighting inadvertently, so that's what I select here given the choices available. I then quickly run upstairs past the Crucible Knight and loot the talisman there. I pick up Spear Talisman for the same thing. This is going to give me improved counter thrust damage against enemies, so now I have like a lot of counter thrust damage. So I'm fighting the Crucible Knight alone for a little while because they're still busy looting downstairs and he followed me up a lot faster than I expected. So I try and set poison on him because you can poison Crucible Knights in order to deal damage to him while I'm dodging around, because I'm going to have to dodge around a little bit more while I'm waiting for them to come upstairs. So we then take on the next Crucible Knight very, very quickly. We manage to stagger him after I mark him, and then I poison him a little bit, which was probably unnecessary considering how quickly he went down. And then the next Crucible Knight, I ultimate after I mark him, and this is simply because my ultimate comes off cooldown so fast the way it is set up with my relics, with the one that, you know, defeats enemies and recharges some of it each time, that I'm just trying to get these guys down quickly so we can get more of them killed before the Nightreign comes in so we can get more XP. So we hop across the middle to take on the next Crucible Knight. Unfortunately, the Duchess goes down, but I'm able to pick her up pretty fast, and then we finish off the Crucible Knight. So then we head up and kill a couple more Crucible Knights, and my rewards are buffing my incantations or sorceries, which I'm not using at all, or getting increased attack damage while dual-wielding weapons. This doesn't apply to what I'm doing right now either. So I really basically didn't get anything good, and I just took the sword because I really didn't have any other option. And the reward I got from the next Crucible Knight increased either charge attacks or my maximum FP. I'm not really using FP when I'm playing Ironeye all that often, unless I have like Rain of Arrows or maybe some other weapon skill on a melee weapon. I don't really use a lot of FP, so that's not super helpful. The charge attack does apply to R2 attacks though, so I grabbed that. So immediately after that I loot a nearby chest and I see a Rotten Great Axe. And Rotten weapons are again one of those things where even if you're a ranged character and you're not planning on meleeing at all, seeing a Rotten weapon, you should probably pick it up unless you don't have to sacrifice anything too good to get it. Even if you plan on dropping it for a teammate later so they can use it. Or even if, you know, you get into a boss fight and you just hit a few times, trigger the Scarlet Rot, and then back away and going to do what you're going to do anyway. It can be really helpful. So I decided to pick it up. So after killing the Crucible Knights there, I have almost 300,000 runes, so I decided to hit a nearby site of grace and make our way to the nearest church to level up. Remember that I had 2 rune buffs early on in this run that have now compounded into way more runes, so I'm going to get several levels from this, and then we head on to the next church. I see a scarab on the way, so I decide to stop and kill it, and it's a ritual sword talisman. This increases your attack power, which will affect any damage you deal when you're at full health, whether you're a spellcaster or a ranged character or melee character. And again, since I'm playing a ranged character trying to stay at full health most of the time, trying not to get hit, this is excellent for me. It would have also been good for effects. So on the way to the church, we decide to hit the nearby camp that's kind of between us and the church, as there's an elder lion inside, and it's not a very difficult enemy. So I mark it as quickly as I can, and once my ultimate is charged, I just ult to speed up the progress of this fight in order to allow us to reach the church faster, so we can make sure we get that extra flask. So my buffs, not a lot of good choices again, so I just take increased maximum FP. Again, I'm not really planning on using weapon skills, but if I happen to get a good one, maybe I can use it like Rain of Arrows or something. We then get the church and head to a nearby fort. Fex still doesn't have really great spells in this run, so we're hoping maybe we'll get one here. And the Rotten Great Axe actually comes in handy because of the Crystallions at the top. I don't have my ultimate charged, but this is a much better weapon against them than my bow would be, so I use it to take them down really quickly. So after defeating the boss, Fex pings that there's a staff in there that has improved ranged weapon attack, so I go ahead and pick that up and sub it out for something that's not really doing much for me. I then look at the rewards that I got from the boss. Neither of them is particularly good, so I quickly tag the Site of Grace, and then we head onward. We managed to find another scarab on the way, and this one's Erdtree's favor, which is absolutely fantastic for anyone, but I already have a Spear Talisman and Ritual Sword Talisman, so I let someone else pick it up. And when we get to the end of day 2 boss area, I decide to drop the Rotten Great Axe for Duchess, and she's the only melee character. I am in melee range sometimes because of marking, and I could have used it myself. I have a little bit more health probably than Duchess, but I decided to give it to her in the off chance that maybe she wanted to apply Rot with it. So as the end of day 2 trash spawns, it's a bunch of enemies. I decided to go ahead and use my ultimate here to speed up this part. And because, again, I have replenished ultimate when we defeat enemies, it's almost back to full when the boss spawns, and it's the Outland Commander who also has ads, so it'll come in useful in this part of the fight. So the first thing I do is quickly mark the boss when he spawns, but then I'm waiting for his ads to spawn too, and I'm trying to mark both of them, because if we can hit with AoEs, we might be able to stagger them. Unfortunately, I slide through a little bit too early before they've been spawned in, so I don't mark either of them. So during this fight, I'm pretty much locked in on the boss. I decided to avoid the ads completely, just keep dodging them and just keep pinging the boss. And this gets me a lot of aggro from the boss throughout this fight, but I just figured we can mess around with the ads, or maybe we can accidentally AoE them down, you know, with spells and things like that, and status effects, rather than having to focus on them and then take this boss down. Depending on your setup, this might not be the best strategy for you, but that's just what I deemed in this case. So once my ultimate's up, I wait for an opportune moment where I can hit the boss and the ads. Even though I'm not trying to kill the ads, it can still knock them down, prevent them from dealing damage for a while. If they had been at like lower health or something like that, we might have been able to finish one of them off really quickly or something. So it's still a good idea if you have like an AoE ultimate like on Ironeye, you know, to try and use it to the best advantage that you can when you are using it. So after we defeat these boss, my choices are improved poise or resistance. None of those are very good for the boss that we're going to be facing, or just generally for Ironeye, or periodic giant glint blades. This is obviously the choice. This helps to increase his damage when you're close to a boss, where it can track on and hit them. It also helps with stance damage, so they stagger more frequently. So once we get into the final boss area, I level up to level 15, which is max level because we killed the Crucible Knights. And then I have an option of either upgrading my poison bow or my bow that has frostbite on it. The frostbite bow does more damage in general, but this boss has a thing where, you know, when you deal poison damage to him, he stops to spit it out, allowing you to continue attacking, which will be good for our Duchess and our Mage, since it'll be held in place during that period. So I decided to go ahead and increase or upgrade the poison bow, because I feel like I'm going to be using that more throughout the fight, even though the damage is a little bit lower. I then buy some consumables, the things that are going to increase my damage. I also buy effects, some Starlight Shards, because I just have a lot of runes to spend. Basically get myself dexed out with consumables before we go into the fight. So once the fight starts, I buff with a turtleneck and exalted flesh to increase my stamina regen and my damage, and then I start attacking into the boss, waiting for my opportunity to mark it. This is usually when he first attacks you, so you can slide through it and get behind him and mark him simultaneously. So we managed to poison him not too long into the fight, which stalls him for a second. Then we're able to get frostbite on him as well, which reduces his resistances, making him take more damage from Vex's spells. And then he shouts not long after that and hard locks onto me. I again use my mark to evade his attack, slide through him, get behind him, and then I trigger poison on him again, so he stops where he was going to charge again, and we're able to get some damage into him. During phase 2, I decide to run away and heal up during his lightning explosion, and I see that he's going to charge at me, and I decide to use my ultimate right here in order to use the iframes from it just to avoid this attack completely, because sometimes when he dives at you and the follow-up explosion on the ground, it can be hard to dodge out of. And then I mark him again quickly and get a lot of shots into him while I'm sort of kiting him around. I would love to get some more charged attacks with R2 in here, because he's such a big target. You can get all 3 arrows into him more reliably, but he's on me so much, if I get into that crouch animation, I'm likely to get hit, so I just keep attacking with R1. And when we do finally stance break him, I take the opportunity to get some charge shots into him, which can help increase your damage if you have the opening. And then we take the boss down not too long after that. I hope you guys got something out of this Ironeye video. Marking is so crucial on Ironeye. You want to make sure you do it like religiously. Having the extra mark available so you can keep marking when one is coming off cooldown is great. And when you get those pops on marks, you can do some big damage, big stance damage that really helps out your team. As always, if you guys have feedback on the run, things I should have done differently, things I should have done better, things I shouldn't have done, or if you have questions about the run, about why I did certain things, you can leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer them as soon as I can.